Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
Oh, something happened.
Thank you.
That wasn't me. All right.
Cool. Over to you, Tabitha.
Cool. Can you guys see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can see and hear you.
Right. I'm going to share my screen now. This one. Start this. All right, cool. Can you guys see my screen?
You can.
All right, perfect.
Yes.
Good evening then, everybody. My name is Tabiso Magwaza. I am, like Nati said, an electrical engineering graduate, although that was many years ago. I don't think it's relevant anymore. What I am is a software engineer. I've been doing this ever since varsity. And I'm a dad. I'm a dad to this cute little button here. Love it to bits. And today I'll be giving you guys a talk about reviving web accessibility and just overcoming some of the challenges that we see today with these modern frameworks that we use. So recently I've started to identify as an accessibility conscious web developer. Now, for those of you who don't know what that means, I don't blame you. I literally just made the term up some weeks ago. But what I mean by it, what I'm trying to essentially communicate is that I'm a web developer who, as I'm developing web applications, is a little bit conscious about, how accessible the different components, as well as, just the application as a whole is. And I do try to make it as accessible as possible. But I mean, life being what it is, I don't always succeed. And the last part of being an accessibility conscious web developer is that I at least feel guilty whenever I find myself shipping applications that are not accessible. Now, I didn't start out this way. I started web development about 5 years ago. And when I was still, an infant in the web development space, I pretty much thought about accessibility the same way that I found a lot of other developers think about accessibility, which is that it's about developing for the minority. Like, it's developing web applications for people who are like completely visually impaired, or maybe some of those weirdos that we find that navigate the website using just the keyboard and decide to completely forget their mouse or trackpad. And honestly, I didn't care much about those people for quite a long time, until it was a few months ago when I started to become one of those weirdos. Just, I don't know, this one time I tried to navigate a website using just the keyboard, and I loved it. And I've been a keyboard weirdo ever since. So since that time, I've then just been very conscious of how accessible web applications are and how people interact with web applications in general. And one thing I've started to notice is that there's a spectrum of users in a website. So accessibility is not really like a 0 or 1 kind of thing. You don't either, completely accessible or, not use accessibility features at all. And on the spectrum, we can sort of just place the people who are visually impaired all the way there on the left. So they just use accessibility features. They access the website using a screen reader, and they need the websites to be accessible in order for them to use it. And then I would say somewhere here in the middle, you have guys like me, the keyboard weirdos that just decide that, you know what, we don't like mice, we don't like trackpads, so we're just gonna press tab, 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 tab all the time. And yeah, I would put us somewhere here in the middle. And then right at the end, which is what I think a lot of developers, certainly what I used to think most users are mouse users, where these are just users that completely always use a mouse or some kind of pointed device to navigate the site. And what I noticed is that once I started to observe users, once I started to even observe myself and how I used to interact with website, is that for the majority of users, we don't lie on either extreme. We actually lie on the spectrum between the keyboard users and the mouse users. Now, what this means is that we essentially predominantly use the mouse to navigate a site, but we will have some keyboard accessibility expectations of it. An example I can give is that we would want, for example, to press enter in order to submit a form, or maybe to click a button. Or we might, expect that when we click escape, it might like dismiss a modal that was open or something like that. And what I then noticed is that we would try it and then, of course, revert back to the mouse or trackpad because we have it available. But in that moment where we try it and it doesn't work, it just leaves a little bit of a bad impression of the website or web application that we're on. It makes it feel a little bit frustrating, a little bit unprofessional, and just a little bit unpolished, right? And that is kind of how my journey of being an accessibility conscious web developer began. I always want to create websites, experiences that are polished, that feel good to the user, and that just implement things that people would expect to be implemented on the website. Now, I know that like around the web, there's like a lot of people that are accessibility conscious web developers, and our journeys are probably different about how we got here. But once we are here, I think that we all like have the same kind of challenges when it comes to developing accessible web applications. And that is the fact that it's hard. Like previously, before web frameworks and all of that, we would normally rely a lot on libraries, things like jQuery, to implement a lot of our components and stuff. And we wouldn't actually notice how much work goes into actually building these components to be accessible and usable by all of the people that navigate our websites and access them through different mediums. So what this talk is about is just shining a bit of a light on those kind of issues. We'll take a look at one such component now, and then maybe exploring some of the things that the web community has built, some of the libraries that have come up in order to solve some of these problems and essentially bring us back to a world where the web can be accessible again, that it can be, that is not excluding people that choose to access our websites in different ways than we had intended them to use. I will move over to today's demo. And today's demo is essentially just, okay, let me just get this out of the way first. Right, so this is today's demo. It is a website that has a modal. Now, modals are extremely common UI elements that we use. I mean, every website or web application has to have some kind of modal. And modals are simple, right? You tap on the modal, it normally has some kind of overlay to blur out the background. And then there's normally some kind of thing that it wants to show you in some kind of card. And then you can dismiss the modal and then get back to whatever you were doing on the page. And I mean, once I'm going to use React here because that's the framework that I've been using, for the past year or so. But I mean, in terms of whichever framework you are working on, the concept is really the same, right? You have some kind of CSS that has some kind of component that is absolutely positioned, and then there's some kind of background here, and there's some kind of content that is inside the modal, and then you can dismiss it. You can toggle it on and off so that you use some kind of state. So for example, in this situation, we have this false variable, which if it's false, the model is hidden. If it's true, the model is visible. And honestly, for a mouse user, this model is perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. You can see, I click it, ship it, it's on, ship it, it's off. But let's put ourselves in the shoes of the keyboard weirdo like me, and just imagine that we decided to smash our mouse to the walls and we decided to completely ignore our touchpad. And now we're navigating this simple site just with our mouse. So I would come here, I'll probably press tab, and then I'll press enter to open the modal. And then I'll try to press tab to kind of like get to the next tabbable element. And there I am. I am completely stuck. At this moment, I actually can't leave the modal, and the only way for me to close this is to essentially reload the site, or to my disappointment, reach for my mouse and then close the modal, which sucks, right? And the actual problem here, we can start to see it if we look at the markup, is that this close button is not a button at all. It's actually a div element. So what this kind of highlights is the importance of semantic HTML, that semantic HTML is not just about, you know, making your website look pretty. It's about allowing the browser to give your components or your UI elements certain functionalities that users expect to be there. And right now, you can't tab to this element because it's not a button. So the solution here is to simply just change this. Instead of it being a div, it has to be a button. Now, of course, buttons do come with their own styling. You can see that now it messed up my border, but I mean, we can easily fix that by setting the background color back, you know, to be a transparent color, and then getting rid of that border, that CSS, that border that the browser automatically adds. And there you go. You have the button is back, and then now, as a keyboard user, I can actually tab to the button, press enter, and then get rid of it. Cool. All right. Now that is the first thing, but there's like a ton of other things that for the keyboard user that are incorrect about this. And what I love about web development is that we love ourselves some documentation. So there's this website called Yaria, which essentially documents the different things that you might expect from different elements that are being used around the web. So I'm on the dialog modal currently, but if I just click here on patterns, you'll see that they document, how accordions should work, alert buttons, carousels, and just a lot of the things that, a lot of the elements that you will probably need to build at some point as a web developer. And the first one now that we're going to tackle is the tabbing. You can see that tab moves it to the next element, the next focusable element, which is fine. But we're not really good in terms of tabbing from the last element. It says that when you tab from the last element in the modal, it's supposed to then shift the tab to being on the first focusable element. So if you check here, just open this up and tab, it tabs outside the modal. And it's the same as if I press shift tab, it kind of goes outside the modal, which is not very good for me as a keyboard user. So in order to solve this, luckily the React community has come together and built this focus lock component. So essentially it just traps focus within a certain element. So I'll just grab this, put it in our modal. And like I said, this demo is very React focused. There's probably something equivalent for whatever framework that you use. Be sure to look for that on the Googles. But the moment I wrap this in a focus lock element, now if I tab here and then do this, you can see that the nice thing, first of all, is that the focus is automatically on the first element, which is the close button. But now, no matter how much I tab, I will never leave this modal. which is essentially what the documentation says we should be doing here. And then another one is that escape should close the dialog. Currently, if I press escape, no matter how many times I press it, I can't really close the dialog. Now, of course, a JavaScript way to solve this problem is to have an event listener. So we essentially listen for the press of escape, and then we would dismiss the modal. In here, in React though, if we want to do that, if we want to use event listeners, we'd have to create some kind of effect so that on mount, we essentially have this event listener set up. So I'm going to call it handle escape press, and then it's going to receive just the normal JavaScript stuff here, which is going to say that if your the key that you pressed, event.key, is equals to escape, then what we want to do is we want to call the same function that dismisses the modal, right? And then, of course, React is going to complain a little bit that this needs to be a dependency. And then I'm going to add the event listener here for the key up event, and then I'm going to handle dismiss. No, not handle dismiss, handle escape press. Because this is React again, I'm going to need to clean this up somehow so that I can, so that I can remove this event listener whenever this component unmounts. So this just prevents a memory leak in React. And then, yeah, and there you have it. Now, if I press escape, modal gone, I can do this and press escape. Perfect. Now, we are essentially done in terms of all of the things that are necessary documented by React Aria, but there's still certain things that I think are missing as a keyboard user for this particular modal. Well, even for the mouse users, there's still certain things missing. Like for example, whenever we click a modal, you would expect that when you press the backdrop, right, it would dismiss the modal. That's kind of the functionality that's been, that's kind of the thing that you would expect now, because that's how a lot of modals work. So in order to do that, we would just put this on click here, and then we'd say handle dismiss here. And then now we've kind of solved that. So you might be thinking now that, oh, you just put an on-click handler on a div, and I just said that that's not correct. And you're right, it is not really correct in most cases, but I mean, in this case, this is a redundant action. So there is already a close button for keyboard users. So it doesn't hurt to have mouse users have, a little bit more ways to close the modal to interact with it that are not strictly, available for all of the other kind of users. So I think this is fine. And then the next thing is the fact that it's a little bit weird. Okay, let me show you. It's not apparent here, but let's maybe think of a situation where there was like a lot of content on this modal, right? Well, not a lot, but yeah, this much content on the modal, right? If you see that the modal is open, but I can still scroll, right? The idea of a modal is that the only content that you're interacting with is the content that is in front of you, the content that is inside the modal. So I find it a little bit weird that you can scroll through this. So yeah, for our modal, I'm gonna take care of that. And I mean, it's really easy to do. What you actually wanna do is you wanna just set the style, the overflow on the body element to be none, well, to be hidden. And in React, of course, we then essentially just need to run some code whenever the document mounts. So I'm gonna, whenever this component mounts, then I'm gonna go document.body.style what is it, overflow y, which is equals to, I'm gonna make it hidden. And then on the cleanup, so cleanup is essentially code that runs when the component unmounts. I'm assuming, whatever framework you use, it has some kind of concepts like this. So then I'll then just when the component unmounts, I'm just gonna set overflow back to being scrolled, which is what it was previously, right? So now, what did I do? This is what I need to do. All right, so now you can see that as the modal is open, I can't scroll, but then the moment I close it, I can scroll. Perfect. So I think at this point, I'm happy with how the modal is for myself as the keyboard weirdo, but I haven't considered, a whole class of other users, which are the users which are visually impaired. So for those users, they navigate the website using a screen reader. And I don't know if you guys have ever navigated a website using a screen reader before. I know that up until a couple of months ago, I'd never even thought about it. But I found it very interesting what users actually hear when they interact with a website using the screen reader. So I'm gonna play something that will maybe annoy you guys. I'm sorry if it does, but this is the screen reader for Mac. It's called VoiceOver, and then it'll start narrating what
space with applications, Chrome and code. Full screen space, button, group.
Okay.
You are current toggle modal, button. Button, group. You are currently on the button, escape, button. You are space with system preference, VoiceOver off.
Okay, so I don't know if you heard that, but when I was on this button, when I was on the toggle modal button, it correctly said toggle modal. And then the moment I opened the modal, it just said button group. I mean, imagine the screen is like completely blank. What is button group? It doesn't tell the screen reader or the person navigating the site anything about the context of where they are in the document. And that is essentially a problem that a lot of us web developers have with icon buttons, right? Essentially what the screen reader will do is that it will read whatever text is inside the button. So the correct thing here would be to have some text here that says, so I'll essentially describe what this does. So I'd say close button. Yeah, I'll call it a close button. But now this messes up with my styles, right? And the correct way to do it would be to maybe put in like an ARIA attribute on the button, to put an ARIA label or something like that. But having read about it, apparently that is like easier to get wrong than to get correct. So a way that web developers have normally solved this problem now is to create a component, right, that is essentially on the screen, but is not visible to sighted users. But then screen readers can still read what the text that is inside it is. So for example, if you look at this visually hidden component that I have here, by the way, let me know if you want to see the code that is inside here. It's pretty simple. Then on the visually hidden component, you can see that it's not on the page anymore. But if I turn on my screen reader again, and then come here, and
space with applications, Chrome and code, React Act, web content, close button, group.
Right.
You are escape, button. Space with system, VoiceOver off.
Okay, I don't know if you caught that, but it did say now close button group, instead of it just being button group. So at least at this very moment, the keyboard user now, well, the visually impaired user now knows that they're at least on a close button, but they still don't know what they're closing. They don't know, maybe they're closing the app, maybe they are closing their door, nobody knows. So it's very important now to give them context on where they actually are. And what's nice about this page, this Why Aria page, I'll send a link to this page if you guys want it, is that it also documents what Aria labels you would put on such a component in order to let screen readers know what the actual component is. So I'll spare you the reading of it right now. I know that when you want to create a dialogue, you first of all give it a role, and that role is going to be dialogue. And then you're going to have an ARIA modal, and then you're going to set that to true. And then you need to give it some kind of label inside an ARIA label. And that is something that is not in this model currently. But I mean, even for sighted users, it's very important to have some kind of title whenever you have a modal so that they know what this model is for. So I'm going to just put that here, and then I'm going to put the title. And then I'm just going to come to where I use this model, which is at this point. And then I'm going to give it a title. I'll say example model, right? So then I'm just going to turn on the screen reader. I swear to you, this is the second last time I do this. And then I'm going to come in here.
Space with applications, Chrome and code. Entering React App Web Toggle Modal button. Example modal dialog with 2 items. Close button. Button. Group. You are currently on the button. Group escape button. You are cut space with Chrome system preferences. Voice over off.
All right. So I don't know if you caught that, but it really was so much better now for the visually impaired user, because it did say that I'm on the example model, and then it did say that I'm currently focused on the close button, and it does also say that I have elements inside the thing. And if the user were to tap around, they would automatically cycle through all of the elements here, which means that they'll be able to interact with the model as though they were able to do it with the keyboard. Okay, and that really wraps up what I think would be necessary for the visually impaired user. So at this moment, our model is actually, I think, very good. I know I'm definitely not an accessibility expert, so there's possibly some things that I'm missing that would make it easier. But at this moment, where I am with my accessibility knowledge, I'm happy with it. But what you will notice is that this was a lot of work. My God, imagine this is the model, and models are like one of the simplest components that you can think of. There are other components such as drop downs, popovers, and all of that. And all of that all of this JavaScript needs to be written in order for them to function properly. Thankfully, though, this is not a new problem. This is an old problem that React developers have, well, not just React developers, but web developers in general have been thinking about, and they've come up with solutions for them. And honestly, the easiest solution to it is just using a UI library. So there's like a lot of UI libraries that exist. Stuff like Material UI, Bootstrap is really popular, and even Chakra UI is very good. And a lot of them come with these kind of accessibility. So you don't have to think about it, but it's just there for the people that actually that actually need the accessibility or want to use it. But the problem with these ones is that they come with their own styles, and those styles may not be compatible with what you are trying to build. I mean, if you've ever worked on an enterprise application, for example, that is customer facing, you will know that we don't actually, use these kind of component libraries because they're just not customizable enough. A lot of the times we end up having to fight with the styles that come with them. And that is where the solution of unstyled component libraries come in. Now, unstyled component libraries are essentially like component libraries, but they ship components that only come with functionality and no styling at all. So what that allows you to do is to customize it to look and feel however you want it to, but also then removes the need for you to write some of the difficult boilerplate that allows your component to be accessible to different kinds of users. I'm going to go through some of the examples, some of the famous component libraries for React. The oldest one that exists is Reach UI. So you see, Reach UI will give you things like accordions, alert boxes, dialogues, and all of that. And one of the things I love the most about Reach UI is the fact that you don't have to import the entire component library in order to use it. So you can see here, if you wanted to use a dialogue, you just import the dialogue here. So you wouldn't have all of the unnecessary JavaScript for all of the other components. You can see that they also have this visually hidden component that I talked about to essentially have some text on the screen that is not visible to the user. Another option is Radix UI, which is pretty good. They also have a whole suite of components, sliders, some of the components that even Reach UI doesn't have. You can see that they have tabs now, they have accordions and all of that. And a new kid on the block is headless CMS. this one here is actually developed by the team at, what is this, Tailwind, the Tailwind team. And then they did something interesting here is that they also support Vue, and I'm assuming they're planning to, you know, support Angular and other different frameworks as well. But you can see that their component list is a little bit smaller because it is a bit new, but I like it. You know, so you can see that on these examples, they give you the examples of the things, but it's important to note that these are their styles. You know, whenever you use this, it is not going to come with all of these styles. And you can see that you have an example here. I think an interesting exercise would be to see how our modal components that we have, the one that we have now in code, would look like if I were to decide to use something like, you know, headless UI. So I've already gone ahead and installed this. So don't worry, I can use it. And then in order to convert my modal, the one that I have, where is it? The one that I have here, into the other one, I will then just follow the instructions that they give there. First things first, import the modal, and then let me find it. Okay, the way I will do it, let me just copy. Yeah, I'm just gonna copy all of this and then put it here for reference. So I'm gonna do that. And then paste this here, right? So then one thing that's important here, one thing that's nice is that I don't need all of this because all of the keyboard stuff, all of the you know, event listeners and all of that will be handled by the component itself. I'm going to leave the old code here just for reference for now, but you know, since I'm returning early, it doesn't really matter. And then I think I'm just going to copy this part, the part here, and then I'm going to copy this part here, right? So the first thing that you'll notice is that they have this is open prop here, which essentially tells you whether the modal is open or not. Now, the problem with that is that the way that I have structured the modal right now is that I conditionally render it. So as long as it's on the screen, it's just on the screen. Now, of course, an easy solution to that would be to just say that this is always true, but I don't want to do that. I think their API is, you know, has some merit to it. So I'm just gonna create the is open prop here, and then I'm gonna put is open here, and then I'm just gonna not conditionally render it now. I'm gonna allow it to be always on the screen, but then I'm gonna pass the is open to this thing. So then show modal, there it is. And then in here, of course, I'll have to handle submit, no, handle dismiss. And there we go. That is the first part of it. The next part of it is this title, right? Now, they kind of show the title to both cited and non-cited users. You can see here that I only showed it to the visually impaired ones, the screen readers, because, well, I thought the non-cited user don't need it, but it is actually good practice to always have a title on your modal. So I will just leave it here and then say that this title now is for what? It's for this title. Cool. Now the next thing is a description. If you read the docs here on, you know, why ARIA, you'll see that descriptions for modals are optional, but I mean, of course, it wouldn't be difficult to put it here. All right, I can just put the description here and then just conditionally render this entire description thing. So maybe, what is it? Description, and then I can, so if there is a description, you would theoretically want to render it here and then render the description here. Right, so now that is the description, and then the next thing now, the rest of it is just the content that goes inside the modal. So on our normal component, that was where our children was. And then what else are we missing? Okay, yeah, I think we are actually done. let us test it out. So if I come here now and click show model, I can see the markup of my model. See, I have example model, this is an example model. But what you'll notice is that this looks nothing like what our old model looks like. But more importantly, this looks nothing like what we saw here on the headless UI. Now that is because these are unstyled components. There's no styles that come with them. So you will have to create the styles yourself. And that is essentially the selling point of unstyled components, is that they don't ship with any styles, which means that you can mix and match them however you want. I can even replace this with, so for example, if I decide I don't like headless UI anymore, I want to use Radix UI, I can switch that modal component to the other modal component, and my application doesn't have to change. But in order to get it to, of course, look like the way that it was looking before, we just need to import the styles. I will take this style here that was originally here and put it in here, so you can see it goes in the middle now. I will take my backdrop. This model unfortunately does not come with a backdrop, so I will have to put my backdrop, what is it? Is just above the dialog. So the equivalent of dialog in this one is this panel. So then I will have the backdrop there. And then the other styles, what else did it have? Okay, it has the styles.dialog, which is essentially the panel. So I'll take that and put it in there. And there you go. Now our model is starting to look like what it looked like before. The one thing we're missing now is the button that was like the first element on here. And at this point, we can see now that this here is our model. And what's nice about it is that it works the same way as it worked before. So you can see now, do that, and click it, escape, and all of that. But I didn't need to write any of the code in this particular situation. So all that's left now is some cleanup. Remove that. We don't need that anymore. We don't need focus locking anymore. And we are done. So the idea here is that I do understand that for web developers, it is a lot of work to create accessible components, and that a lot of these things were previously not really our responsibility. But with things like these component libraries, like headless UI, like Radix UI, it really has become a lot easier to create accessible component libraries, and we don't need to now always compromise in terms of accessibility just because we don't have the time for it. But of course, I do encourage you to at least try to make the component yourself. Like, for example, you can see that I didn't immediately import the visually hidden component from Radix UI because it's a relatively trivial component to make, and you will learn a lot just by attempting to do it. Right, that brings me to the end of the talk, and I really do hope that at this point I have convinced you to become an accessibility conscious web developer. That the next time you are developing a web application, you will at least think about the accessibility, that you will attempt to make it accessible. And if you end up, for whatever reason, not making it accessible and shipping an inaccessible product, I hope that you feel guilty about it. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. That brings me to the end of the talk. So I think I'll just answer some questions now.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Please, if you have a question, can you drop it on the chat? We're monitoring the chat, and please do remember that there are JetBrain prizes to give away to 3 people.
So from the chat, Evolt asks, how much work is involved in retrofitting these ideas into existing apps? Is it mostly manual intervention required?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes, it is manual work required because the API that you might have created for your application is probably going to be different from the API that the library creators have implemented. And also, I mean, even the libraries themselves, the different libraries themselves, they have different APIs, right? So it's mostly just manual work of you going in and then looking at what your component looks like and trying to match it to what the component library brings.
Awesome. Then Rory says, question 1, you are awesome and thank you.
Oh, thank you. Lovely question.
Question 2, please tell me how your personal journey brought you to this passion. What energizes you?
Well, I'm assuming you're asking me about being an accessibility conscious web developer. Honestly, my personal journey has always been about creating the best applications that I can create, like the best ones. I dislike applications that I think are not, that people didn't put a lot of effort into building, that are just not polished. So essentially, at some point, I was, obsessed with CSS. At some point, I loved animations because of how they make the UI feel. And, at some point, I was just taking this random online course and I came across a video on YouTube you should actually check it out if you have the time. It's called The Curse of React. And it was actually the creator of Radix UI that was talking about this particular concept of how frameworks these days have broken accessibility. And from that day onwards, I've just decided to be more conscious about accessibility.
Awesome. Craig says he joined late, but thanks, Craig. This will be uploaded to our YouTube in due time. We have recorded the session, so you might be able to catch it on our YouTube. Peter says he feels so bad for never considering visually impaired users in his many years of front-end work. Thanks. Evolt asks another question. Do you have any tips, advice, and statistics to help convince stakeholders that it is worth the investment in time and effort to add this kind of accessibility features?
You see, that is one of the things that I'm struggling with now. Like, even with the current project that I'm working on, it is extremely hard to convince people to consider accessibility, especially if they haven't, been in contact with someone that has, had these kind of issues. And it's really hard to measure accessibility, like how much people actually want accessibility on your website. I remember I was talking to a friend and I was like, it's like an egg and a chicken thing, right? Is that do developers not implement accessibility because people don't use it, or do people not use accessibility features because developers don't implement them, right? But I think in terms of convincing stakeholders, you can show them how easy it is to do, and you can also like show them how, even as we speak, the web is going in towards a direction where all things that are created need to be accessible. I mean, think about how by law, a website like SARS, for example, that needs to be accessible by everybody has to be accessible, right? Because how are you going to file your taxes if you are visually impaired, right? So it just makes your user base grow in terms of who can use a website, but it also makes the people that do use your websites much happier. But unfortunately, I don't have any statistics, and I am really still in the process of looking for, concrete data, concrete numbers to convince stakeholders as well.
Yeah, and maybe something I just thought of is if you're already using one of these frameworks, say now Material UI, for example, right? You can actually see how much of it is already baked in and how little effort you need to exert in addition to add the extra accessibility, right? So yeah, something to think about. There is a question about what libraries are there for .NET developers. Do you know of any?
Unfortunately, no. I've just been, React all this time, but I can look into it and maybe I'll let you know.
Cool. Ewald says stakeholders are all about cutting costs and think that alt labels on images are accessibility done and dusted. He'll definitely be trying to push for it more. Thank you. Craig says you mentioned a legal requirement. What law covers accessibility in South Africa, and does it also include language requirements?
I won't say I know exactly what law. I just know that this is not something that I actually, went deep into the research with. I was just talking with someone and they're like, they used to work for SARS, and, SARS has the requirement that it has to be, accessible. So it's not really something that I have concrete stats on, but yeah, you feel free to just, look it up. Maybe it's somewhere out there on the Googles.
Cool. Are there any other questions? None from what I can see. Also, feel free to raise your hand. We can ask you guys to unmute if you'd like to have some further discussion. But thank you, Tabiso. Would you like to choose 3 questions that you found the most engaging, or would you like to ask a question to see if people are listening to hand out the prizes?
I think I'd like to choose questions. There were some questions that I was hoping you guys would ask, and you did ask.
Cool, go for it.
So I think from the top, the first one was, what brought me to my journey. I didn't really, expand a lot on that on the talk. And yeah, thank you for letting me talk about how I got to be an accessibility conscious web developer. And then the next question that I'd like to point out is what libraries are available for .NET developers. I was hoping you'd ask that because yeah, I have not checked out any other libraries. For example, I haven't checked out what's available for Angular, but I even forgot that .NET developers are web developers in their spare time. So thank you for reminding me of that. And then definitely the winner has to be what advice would you give to what tips and statistics would you give to stakeholders in order to convince them to hear more about accessibility? That is definitely the hardest one. It's very easy for people to think that it's hard to make a website accessible, but also to not immediately see the benefit of making your websites accessible. So that is definitely a question that still needs answering. That is something that we still need to ponder about. And man, if you find an answer to that, please hit me up. My LinkedIn or Twitter, I can even give you my WhatsApp. And then I will use that formula as well to convince my stakeholders.
Unfortunately, Ewald is not allowed to win a prize. So could you pick someone else?
Okay, Ewald is not allowed. Okay, then let's give it to Lehlohonolo, who asked about the if there are any libraries for .NET developers.
Oh, okay. So if you guys, so that's Rory that you won, and then I believe you said Nolo, sorry for butchering the name, and then what was the third winner?
The third winner was Rory, who asked about
Yes.
yeah.
So I got Rory, I've got the .NET developers, and what was the third one?
Then I need to ask, I need to pick a last one. Then Craig asked about legal requirements.
Awesome. Cool. So if you three could just DM me your email addresses, or alternatively email our email address, which I was trying to look up, but I am a little slow. I think it's admin at, I believe it's admin at developer UG. Then we can get you guys your JetBrains prizes. Thank you very much. And thank you, Tabiso. This was really informative, and I'm definitely going to go check out if any of our frameworks that we use on a day-to-day I can tweak it a little, you know, and start being more accessible.
Oh, then I've done my good deed for the day.
And then once again, thank you to our sponsors. It's Tarsus On Demand as our primary sponsor. And then we have Intellect sponsoring the Zoom room. And then we also have JetBrains sponsoring the prizes. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining. If I'm going to unlock the allowing everyone to unmute themselves, if you guys want to have some chats and discussions, please do note though that I am moderating this and will mute you if you take advantage of the situation. Cool. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Right, wait, are you guys hanging around to chat, or can I drive home now?
Feel free if you want to drop off.
Oh, we can unmute now. And
Yeah,
it's-
everybody's on meeting, so I don't know.
Oh, I didn't even realize. Thank you for talking to Biso. And I work for Microsoft, and I lead their accessibility advocacy for globally for developers.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah, I'll pop in the chat here just a blog that I did recently. It's not recently, it's last year, but I couldn't find anything else. This was the nicest one. But I love the fact that you did this, and I love the fact that you're a perfectionist, because I've spoken at the UN, I've spoken at the EU Parliament on accessibility, and it's always been a hard sell. I've got dwarfism, so I'm short, so it's easy for people to think that I'm heavily invested in it. But I love the fact that I can now tell them that I've met a developer who says that they want to implement something better. It's literally a quest and a passion to do it better. And accessibility is a addition. We see it, we make so much money off accessibility. I can't give you the stats though, but literally we spend $23 million just on accessibility testing, just for one of our teams. And we have a huge accessibility testing, but then we have Microsoft Office and Windows and everything, which is also a huge push for us.
Wow, that is actually very awesome. Like, I also hope that, you know, it's something that really catches on, because I think, yeah, it's like you said, it's just about, it just feels better, the website. I think I've always thought that like accessibility is always like just either the blind people, that's what you're creating for, or you're creating for mouse users. But
I tell you a secret. What you're really creating for is the silver generation, so the people with failing eyesight, because we've got stats that those are $1 trillion industry. So as a result, you don't focus and hone in on one disability. You go where the money is, and the money is everyone. So anyone with failing eyesight will be able to do it. It's called inclusive design. But if you want to know where the real money is, it's those people, those individuals. They don't have kids. They've got the most disposable income out there. And if you've ever dealt with your granddad or an elderly person, you'll see immediately that they battle with that. So our biggest focus and our biggest drive is actually to cater for generational rather than only disability.
That is actually very, very interesting, right? Because those are the people with the money, right? But the ones, imagine you're building like a financial application for Forex people, right? For people who travel a lot. Those people have money, but a lot of the times they're old. So if you don't make an accessible website, web application, then they won't want to use it.
Yeah, and then so it's called universal design or user-centered design. We're not the first Microsoft people to actually have done it. But we do it any which way. So what you do is you try to solve for a spectrum as broad as possible. And one of those is people who are visually impaired, but then it's also that silver generation, and you extend that to cover as much as you can. I love the fact that you use today frameworks, because we also advocate that you go with an ARIA specific compliant framework, and you just manage to implement it by nature. As long as you don't mess with anything underlying those. So definitely, if you want to speak to people about profit, you can just tell them that go for anyone over the age of, I'm 43, I can't even see out of my eyes, over the age of 40. That's your intended market. And then ask them if they just want to exclude everyone.
That is actually interesting stats, right? Just to figure out, like, for example, what level of impairment does one get as they get older? So, for example, as you get older, you get hard at hearing, you get hard at seeing. So all of those people are actually a much larger population than, just including people who are naturally just blind.
Yeah.
Or naturally just...
But we've got a lot of experience. I didn't want to send you some stats on the line, but we've got a lot of experience on how to do this, because we deal with government also, like large governments, US government, EU Parliament, and their immediate response is also, okay, cool, conform to this, but help us understand why. So if you go into Microsoft Accessibility, you'll see that we've got a plethora of studies that actually go through that. But our biggest push now is to show people how we could use ChatGPT for this. I've got a talk there on YouTube. You can go watch it now. And
awesome.
AI is another changer, because we're using tools, they're not released yet, that goes into your code and just fixes it for you. It just says, make this accessible.
Oh, yeah, that would be awesome.
That's coming. That's coming. But it's something that we're looking at, because the AI needs to play nice with us also. I did a small little talk there. You can see how you can use ChatGPT, but you just take your code, chuck it into ChatGPT or one of the Azure services, and we'll just fix it.
Yeah, that is awesome. That would
Rory,
actually solve a lot of the problems.
Rory, you need to keep in mind, so some people are working for big corporates who still don't trust the ChatGPT or are not running local ones. So we can't just blanketly tell people to go chucking their code.
Yeah. So we don't trust it either. Out of all the people, do not trust this murder bot. So what we did is to get it, we nannied it with Playwright. Playwright is like the Selenium alternative. So what we do is we get Playwright, which is an AI, to say, here's a problem, did you fix it? Or play nice and like that. And then we just run through it, and Playwright is this meticulous tool and comes back and says, you didn't behave. I do not trust this thing as far as I can throw it, and I don't even know where they keep it in a data center.
Indeed. It's great.
That is awesome. Actually, I just realized now that there's another part of this talk that I wanted to talk about, but then I didn't.
Every human, Tabiso, you want to speak to. And when I speak about accessibility and you're in the lift with me, I talk to them about accessibility. And that's what you need to become as an ally. And I love the fact that you've got passion, because use that to drive and to speak at every single stadium and avenue that you can do, because we need more allies like you.
I'm definitely an ally. I was going to say, I forgot about React Aria. React Aria is actually one of the ones that I wanted to try. Have you heard about that one?
Yes. So you must understand also that Aria is a bit of it's more detailed. We don't recommend going full Aria. You never go full Aria, because Aria also means that you have to be aware of what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're not, you screw up more than you actually fix. So you can go down that route, but then you need to know the different Aria laws. And then once you have those principles, then you can go down it. So my recommendation is first learn about Aria and then go and use the framework.
Yeah. Oh no, what I meant was the other framework. So you know how I talked about Radix UI and Headless UI and all of that? There is another one developed by Adobe called React Aria. So what they do is that they take a slightly different approach to what the other, unstyled component libraries take. They don't give you any kind of components. They give you React hooks. So then you essentially like hook into whatever component that you're doing. And then I think it injects some kind of JavaScript, some kind of ARIA labels onto what you want. And then there you go. You have an accessible component. But I haven't tried it. So that's why I think I just forgot to speak about it here.
I haven't used it either. We use React extensively at Microsoft. So we have those testing frameworks, but when I test and I help them test, we encounter everything. We're like hundreds of frameworks. That's why we use Playwright to actually go in and just open a browser, and we can test the code, but that's very difficult. We just go in and we test the browser statistics. I also wanted to just put in the chat window here. So we partner with the largest accessibility testing company called DQ Labs. And in DQ Labs, they actually have accessible ARIA specific widgets. So these are the best widgets you can get because they're seen as the industry, the gold standard.
Oh, okay. That is actually awesome.
If you want to impress someone, you use those, the DQ Labs. It's basically they guarantee the accessibility. It's insane.
That is
the rules engine that Google uses, Microsoft uses, they actually write the rules engine, DQ Labs.
Damn. Whew. All right, guys, I'm actually still at the office. I need to drive home now.
Cheers. Reach out to me if you on LinkedIn if you want to chat a little bit more, Toby. So thanks everyone. Cheers, everyone.
Definitely will reach out, Rory. It was very nice meeting you all. Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. No
Cheers,
problem.
all. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers, everyone.
Ciao, peeps.
Bye. Cool.
The recording.
It will stop now. Don't worry.
Oh, okay, cool.